What is that? How to draw black people hair.
First, get your hairline going. It can be as high or as low as you want it to be. The thing with black hair is that you can make any shape you want, y'all. You think I'm joking? Watch. And boom! When you're drawing African American hair, you have more versatility and like you can do more stuff with it. It's not biased, it's just the truth.
That's what they call our hair a work of art.
We're gonna start making a little bit like zigzaggy scribbles all over these little spheres that I made on our head. Drawing black hair is probably the most fun. You can add your shading, you know what I'm saying? Break mine into little squares because like these are like sections of the hair. Her hair got parted. Add shading and shit. Add some more zigzaggedy jaggedy shapes inside for the shading. And then boom, some beautiful Bantu knots. For him, find the hairline. I'm gonna draw a big circle. Like a big one, a big Bantu knot. Then add more zigzaggedy jaggedy lines following that shape. Drawing an afro is probably the easiest one. Shade it in. Why he look like me a little bit? Erase! Add more zigzaggities. And you're done. Yo, she is so beautiful.
Mistakes that are ruining your art. Don't draw the eyelids randomly. Instead, choose which expression you want to draw and do this. To draw a tired, sleepy eye expression, the upper eyelid should cover half of the pupil. To draw a surprised eye, leave small distance between the eyelids and the iris. To draw a normal eye expression, the upper eyelid should cover 1/4 of the iris. And lastly, to draw an alert eye expression, draw both eyelids barely touching the iris.
Tips for using colored pencils. If you notice your drawing's a little dull at an angle, that's called wax blooming, and you can wipe it off with a tissue. Your hand's oils can smudge the colored pencils, so use a fluffy makeup brush to wipe away wax shavings instead. Instead of finding the perfect shade, mix colors. Always color in a circular motion to avoid streakiness. Always go lighter at the beginning and darker at the end because layering is really important. Using a marker base saves a lot of time. And make sure your pencils are sharp.
Super secret way to draw an afro with a Q-tip. Get some ink on it. I'm dabbing it a little bit with my Pentel pocket brush. And then I just start to add the dabs like so. I'm going to be forming the whole afro. You know, it might have a shape in mind. Maybe you don't. But while doing my light dabs, I can also form the hairline. And I won't be afraid to have the hair go over the ear. Because in this case, I actually want that to happen. You just keep dabbing. And as soon as you feel the ink starts to dry out, use that dry texture for the edge of the afro. Makes everything look a whole lot more realistic. I was careful not to touch the line art in some areas, and for those areas, I'm going to use my art liner to fill them in. Now, at this point, I'm just putting in the final touches here with the edges, or baby hair, or whatever you want to call it. Light taps in the afro itself, and, you know, at this point, you're done. Sup, ma? How you doing?
How to draw for absolute beginners. First, put your pen down and look at your subject for a moment. Drawing is an observational skill. It's not just about the hand. Now, pick up your pen, close one eye, and trace the subject simply by sight, like this. Then, trace the subject once more, but with pen on paper. Don't look down. Instead, allow your hand to simply follow your sight, like a mirror. This is called a blind contour line drawing. While your first attempts may come out something like a scribble, the line quality here has a likeness of real life. In my next video, we'll go over how to keep this quality, but straighten out the proportions. This is a 3-part series.
Colored pencil tips for beginners, Part 1. If the drawing is dull at a certain angle, use a tissue to wipe it off. It will look so much better. Always keep a paper under your hand to avoid smudging. Whenever you're coloring, don't use your hand to wipe off the wax shaving. Get any makeup brush and wipe it off. Use a marker for the base. It will help you save time and save lead. Whenever you're drawing, the first layer always has to be light. And you keep on adding layers, moving the pencil in circular motions to make it look better. Like for Part 2.
Here are some tips for beginner artists. I know I'm not the best artist out there, but I'll give you some tips and tricks that I use. When coloring your drawing, I wouldn't use Crayola or Crazy Art because they don't blend as good as Prismacolor. I really highly recommend Prismacolor color pencils. When drawing fur on an animal, I would use an X-Acto knife or a sharp object. Obviously, I don't own an X-Acto knife, so I'm using a screwdriver. This helps you get really fine looking fur. When blending graphite, I'd use a brush instead of a blending stick because it makes your drawing less smudgy. Also, when coloring, make sure you move your pencil more in a circular motion. It helps you blend your drawing better than just moving your pencil up and down. And finally, I would recommend to buy a white gel pen. It helps you create more depth and highlights in your drawings. Thank you for watching.
Detailed tutorial how I draw the lips.
Okay, so as always, I start with a straight line. Do the same on your paper. Next thing I do is put 3 lines at the top and 3 lines at the bottom. Like so. Then after that, I get the outer corners and focus on this trapezoid shape here in the middle of the mouth. By the way, you'll notice that this is a shorter line and this is a longer line. Okay, so you put those outer corners and the shorter line and the longer line. Then you insert your trapezoid. The next thing I look at is the middle of the cupid's bow. Here. Next thing I look at is this spacing inside the trapezoid. Then apply it on your paper. Adjust the trapezoid if needed. An upside down triangle for that cupid's bow. Bump out the lips with some extra lines. This is the part where you adjust and curve your edges. Erase the lines that are too dark. And just keep adjusting and curving your lines. Then when you look at your reference, you take note of the highlights and the darker areas of the lips. And then if you want, you could separate them into small blobs so you won't get confused in shading. Next is using cross-hatching for shading, 2 different directions. Shade it. Usually the upper lip is darker than the lower lip, but of course that depends on the reference. Add that shadow below the lower lip. Quick tip. Leave these areas out or don't make them too dark because they are a light reflection of the upper lip. By the way, it's the same logic as this when the light bounces back to the object. Adding more values for contrast. Don't forget to shade the teeth. Lightly flick for some more details. Erase for some highlights. Adjust until you're satisfied. And you're done.
We're going to talk about Rembrandt lighting, which is when half the face is in shadow and you have a triangle of highlight on the cheek. It is really common in portrait photography and you can identify it by that telltale triangle right there. As harsh light moves across the face, we have a point that creates optimal contrast, interest, and definition, which are these points right here. Then as the shadow continues, the face falls flat again. If you look at this portrait of Cara Delevingne, you can tell that the background is dark and neutral and doesn't match the highlights or shadows on the face. The shadow curves around the forehead, is carried by the brow line, and then goes down the bridge of the nose. It points down that cupid's bow, and then our upper lip will be darker than our lower lip, but we'll have a rectangle of shadow under it that curves around the chin. Then that highlight curves around her eye socket, down right above her mouth, and around. You can try this with toned paper and charcoal, and here's a little reference of me moving so you can see different lighting patterns.
Do you keep smudging your sketchbook pages because you're too impatient to wait for something to dry? Me too, and I have the simplest tip for you. Instead of working on just one page at a time, work on both pages with 2 separate illustrations. That way you can switch back and forth when one needs to dry. Plus, this usually ends up with illustrations that complement each other.
Okay, so someone asked me tips for young artists. Tip number 1, work with shapes and lines. Break them down when you do your studies. Second tip, draw lines. Yes, a lot of them. Fill your pages and draw circles. These will help you build your confidence in lines rather than putting those scratch marks like this when you draw. We don't want this, we want this. Tip number 3, try different mediums from watercolor to gouache to oils and acrylics and pencils to inks. What's important here is that you get to explore different mediums and different styles and try different techniques. And please don't count your mistakes, rather count the progress that you get from your mistakes. And the most important tip is don't stop creating.
Tips for dot work, part 3. Tip 1. Don't be afraid to create a dotted outline of your shapes so that you know where the edges are and you don't go too far. Tip 2. Eliminate any dot work artist that's better than you.
Buy all the primary colors because then you can make any color in the rainbow. Start off with painting smaller cards. This is how I started. And then try drawing one thing every single day. Just practice getting.
Here's a tip for all artists that I wish I knew before I became an artist. Part 2. When you draw something and you want to share it online, you don't want to be too confident about your art, saying it's the best or I'm like the best artist in the world, because fans don't like it when you're too cocky about your art. But also, don't be shy about your art. Try not to say stuff like, oh, this is my drawing, I know it's not that good, but I like it, so here. You want to be confident about your art, but you don't want to be cocky. Also, if you're a small account, be grateful for all your followers. Don't trick people into following you or liking your videos. So yeah, that's all for now. I hope you like the drawing, and bye bye my loves.
How to make egg tempera paint, part 1. So first, of course, you need an egg, and so what you're going to do is crack the egg and you're going to separate the shell and the egg white from the yolk. Then you're gently going to rock the yolk back and forth on your hands, and as you are rocking it back and forth on each hand, you're going to wipe the egg white off of your hand. So you don't want any egg white attached to your yolk at all. So you're just going to keep rocking it back slowly until the yolk kind of almost sticks to your hand a little bit. But you can kind of see there's some of that gooiness still on there. So you're just gonna keep going back and forth. The hard part is not to make it pop. If you pop the yolk while you still have egg white on it, you have to discard the whole thing and do it over again. Then you're gently going to pop the yolk and you're gonna hold on to the sac. You don't want the egg yolk sac in your egg emulsion, so you're just gonna get the nice and yellow stuff. Then you're gonna do a 1-to-1 ratio of water to yolk. Mix it all up real good, and that is your egg emulsion. Watch for part 2. How to make egg tempera paint, part 2. So with your egg carton, you're going to put pigment in each little egg holder. Then you're going to put a little bit of water in each color to disperse the pigment. You're going to mix it up until the consistency is kind of like peanut butter. Then you're going to take your egg emulsion and you're going to do a 1-to-1 ratio of egg to pigment. Mix it all up. Then you're going to test your paint. So you're going to do a line on a piece of glass. You're going to wait for it to dry, waiting for paint to dry. Then you're going to take a razor and scrape the paint. And if it rolls up like a ribbon, then you know you have enough egg to pigment ratio. If it kind of crumbles on itself, then you don't have enough egg. So there it is, perfect little ribbon. There you go. Let me